Hello and welcome to a lesson in warm-up and cool-down. This is for the AQA GCSE syllabus. So just a reminder in regards to the platform, so any text boxes you see in yellow are tasks for students. Any in green are the students should be note-taking. Obviously if you see any blue text boxes, then they are the differentiation tasks. And any red text boxes, they're sort of ideas for teachers specifically in terms of teaching and learning strategies. So what does the AQA syllabus say? Basically, you need to ensure that you are clear of the specific parts of the warm-up and the specific parts of the cool-down. As well as that, we need to be clear to students as to why do we actually do warm-up and cool-downs. And students need to be able to understand and justify elements of an appropriate warm-up and cool-down. And then finally, sort of the specific benefits of a warm-up and cool-down. So if we just start in this starter task, you can see here it's basically asking you to write down any keywords of what we mean by a warm-up and a cool-down in physical education. So I'm going to pause the video there and just write down any keywords first and foremost. Okay, so hopefully you've unpaused the video now and you can see a few specific keywords you may have got down on your page. Obviously when we warm up, we're looking at this idea of preparation, of getting the body physically and mentally ready. So readiness would have been a good keyword as well. We obviously warm up for injury prevention. I think a lot of you would have written that down on your page. And we obviously warm up as well to increase the range of movement at a specific joint, and that refers to flexibility, and we can do that through different types of stretching. So in essence, what is a warm-up? We need to ensure that we've got this kind of clear definition. So it's preparing the body and the mind for physical activity. So what should we include in a warm-up? So what are the aspects that we include within a warm-up? So as GCSE candidates, we need to ensure that we recognise that in a warm-up, initially, we need a gradual pulse raiser. So this is a form of activity which steadily increases the amount of oxygen to working muscles. Once we've completed this, stretching is important, and we've got different types of stretching. And ultimately, a stretch will increase the range of movement to all relevant muscles. And we can stretch in two ways, really. The most common ways that you'll probably be aware of will be static stretching or dynamic stretching. Once we've completed that, we then will move on to a skill-based exercise. So this is any type of physical exercise or an activity or a practice which uses familiar movements, equipment perhaps used in that specific sport. And finally, as part of the warm-up, we need to ensure that we've got some form of mental preparation. So where we start to get focused, we might use specific techniques to help control our sporting arousal level at this time. So a quick task for students, pause the video again, and can you provide examples to the below features of a warm-up? So let's move on to looking at the benefits of our warm-up. So these include body temperature increasing, and the importance of this is, it prevents obviously muscle strains more specifically, so we're not overstretching, for example, and also use that kind of example whereby we look at muscles as a piece of chewing gum. If we have that piece of chewing gum and it's cold and it's not been chewed yet, it's easy to tear it, isn't it? It's easy to pull it apart. But obviously, ultimately, once we start chewing that gum, it's getting warmer, it's more elastic, it obviously stretches easier and better, and that helps obviously prevent injuries such as muscle strains. Stretching is another one which is very important, and that obviously increases the range of movement possible at the joints, and that obviously reduces the chances of injury, especially when we think about tendons in particular. And it's very important to stretch at any specific point of exercise. And then moving on, preparing the mind in a state of alertness and focus. Really important that we get ourselves focused and ready for the task ahead. It will help us in terms of being mentally prepared for what we're about to uptake, and that could be in terms of rugby, so that physical contact element. If our mind is prepared for it, if we're ready for that initial contact, then that's going to help us going to the specific tackles in a prepared manner. Movement skills, obviously we're looking at skill specific exercises as part of the warm-up, but this is important because it can obviously help in regards to muscle memory. If we're using a specific piece of equipment, we're using a specific ball during that warm-up phase, then we're starting to really kind of connect those movement patterns within our brain and within our body. And then finally, the increase in oxygen, which obviously can help in terms of energy production. So ultimately, the more oxygen we get into our working muscles, the energy production, the energy systems that are going to be working within our body are going to be activated fully, and we will be able to get that oxygen to the working muscles quicker. Again, you might want to pause it at this point. I want you to think about starting to apply some of these key features of a warm-up to those specific sports. So football, golf, netball and swimming. Okay, so let's move on to cool down, and ultimately, hopefully from the start of this PowerPoint, when I asked you to write keywords relating to maybe a cool down, this is where students often find a little bit more difficulty. We understand the reason why we warm up, but cool down is as important, and often cool down is forgotten, especially after exercise. A lot of people will just walk off a pitch once they've had done their exercise, but ultimately cool down is as essential as a warm-up. So keywords that would have related to the meaning of a cool down, you could have mentioned words like recovery, removal of lactic acid. It obviously prevents injury once again, similar to the warm-up. We reduce muscle soreness, and obviously we've got that removal of carbon dioxide within the body. So ultimately, what is a cool down? It's an activity that helps to maintain an elevated sort of breathing and heart rate. Ultimately, we are looking to gradually reduce the intensity of, once we've worked and exercised, we're starting to gradually reduce that intensity rather than just stopping completely and it be a massive drop. And finally, stretching all major muscles that have been fully activated in our physical activity. So what are the benefits of a cool down? Ultimately, it allows our body to start to recover after exercise, and this is really important. As I said before, it will reduce muscle soreness, for example, and it will reduce obviously aspects of us getting injured once again. We also remove lactic acid, carbon dioxide and other waste products. Okay, and that's because obviously we're sort of gradually reducing that intensity, but ultimately we're still maintaining that breathing and heart rate, which is important because obviously we want to reduce and we want to get rid of the carbon dioxide, the waste products which have built up while we've been exercising. And finally, this aspect here of delayed onset muscle soreness, we prevent this from happening. Delayed onset muscle soreness is referred to as DOMS, but ultimately if we fully stretch out once we've exercised, we're breaking down that lactic acid, we're breaking down those kind of waste products which might pool within the body and create obviously things like cramps and soreness to follow. So by removing that carbon dioxide, by removing those waste products, we are preventing soreness within the body. One final task for students here: can we try to summarize and can we try to write down how we would apply a cool down to these three sports, so rugby, cycling and rounders? I want you to just write that down. Okay, and this is a last remaining slide really for teachers really. So in terms of the teaching and learning strategies in this particular PowerPoint, I think the first thing to ensure that once you've got your students to flip learn at this task, make sure they complete the worksheets which we've got attached to this PowerPoint, so that they have a clear understanding and understand the reasons specifically for why we cool down and why we warm up. Second of all, this is a really good activity for you to maybe go outside and take your theory lesson and apply it for a practical sense. So can we go outside and can we effectively show our students an effective warm-up and also an effective cool down, so that embeds maybe the learning through a practical setting. And then finally, can we ask students to be a bit more creative and actually produce, whether it be a visualized kind of poster or timeline, it could be a storyline perhaps, and where we ask them to create their own warm-ups, where they have to create maybe specific skill-related exercises which might be included in the warm-up, and then the different types of stretching that they might show, both dynamic and static. So this can be quite a creative task, obviously involving the use of pictures, the use of diagrams, and so on. But again, we want to try and show this AO1 being applied into AO2 specifically. Okay, so that's the lesson there. I hope you found it useful. Feel free to obviously pause it, rewind it, anything that you need to do in regards to getting that learning for this specific task. Thanks very much.